They say power is freedom. Zeus, king of gods, ruler of men, could destroy worlds with a glance. Mountains crumbled at his whisper. Seas parted before his will. Yet each strike of thunder echoed back to him, louder, emptier. Because when you stand at the top, there's no one left to hold you back, and nothing left to hold you together. This is not the story of a god who ruled. It's the story of one who learned what it means to stop ruling himself. Act 1. The birth of power. Before there was order, there was fear. Before Zeus wore the crown, he wore the chains, not of iron, but of fate. His father, Kronos, titan of time itself, had swallowed his children whole, not out of cruelty, but terror. A prophecy whispered that his son would overthrow him, just as he had overthrown his own father before. So the cycle turned, power breeding paranoia, control giving birth to chaos. But one child escaped. Hidden by his mother Rhea on the island of Crete, Zeus grew in secret, nurtured by nymphs, fed by the goat Amalthea, surrounded by warriors who clashed their shields to mask his infant cries. He grew in the shadow of the mountain, learning what his father never could, that true strength begins in vulnerability. When he came of age, Zeus returned. The confrontation was not a battle, it was a reckoning. Zeus did not strike with weapons. He struck with cunning. A potion, slipped into his father's wine, forced Kronos to vomit forth his swallowed children. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon. One by one, they emerged, broken but unbeaten. Together, they waged war. The Titanomachy, 10 years of divine fury. Mountains shattered, rivers boiled. The sky itself tore open as titans clashed with gods, old power against new. And Zeus stood at the center of it all, wielding the thunderbolt forged by the Cyclopes in the depths of Tartarus. With each strike, he rewrote reality. With each roar of thunder, he declared his dominion. When Kronos finally fell, cast into the abyss alongside the defeated Titans, Zeus ascended. He took the throne of Olympus. He became king. The other gods celebrated. They drank ambrosia. They sang of victory. But Zeus felt something strange settling over him, cold and invisible. Responsibility. When you overthrow a tyrant, you inherit his crown and his curse. The very act of taking power through violence plants the seed of fear. What if someone does to me what I did to him? From that moment, Zeus could never truly rest. Every smile became suspect. Every gesture a potential threat. The throne was his, but so was the weight of keeping it. They called him King of the Gods, Master of Sky and Storm. But in the silence of his marble halls, Zeus began to understand what his father had learned too late. Power is not a gift. It's a sentence, and he had just begun serving his. Act 2. The burden of the throne. At first, Zeus ruled with vision. He divided the cosmos with his brothers, the sky for himself, the seas for Poseidon, the underworld for Hades. He established laws, settled disputes among gods and mortals, brought structure to a universe still reeling from war. He became the architect of order. But order, he soon discovered, demands constant vigilance. Every peace is fragile, every agreement temporary. The world did not govern itself. It had to be held in place like a boulder on a slope, always threatening to roll back into chaos. From his throne, he could see everything. The prayers of mortals rose like smoke. Their wars, their loves, their petty betrayals. All of it visible, all of it demanding judgment. A farmer in Thessaly curses his neighbor. Does Zeus intervene? A queen in Mycenae betrays her husband. Does he punish her? A child in Crete questions the existence of the gods. Does he strike the child down, or let doubt spread like wildfire? Every choice mattered. Every decision echoed across the world. And slowly, imperceptibly, Zeus became less a king and more a prisoner of his own authority. He could not love freely, because love is vulnerability, and vulnerability is weakness. When he desired the nymph Io, he transformed her into a cow to hide her from Hera's jealous gaze. When he fell for Europa, he became a bull to abduct her. Again and again, he hid behind masks, because a king cannot afford to be seen. He could not grieve because grief is chaos, and chaos threatens order. When his son Sarpedon died in the Trojan War, Zeus wanted to save him to bend fate itself. But the other gods warned him, if you break the rules for your own son, the entire cosmos will unravel. So he let him die, and felt a part of himself die with him. He could not rest, because rest is surrender, and surrender is defeat. Even in sleep, his mind churned with schemes and contingencies. What if the giants return? What if the mortals rebel? What if another prophecy predicts his fall? The throne became his cage, and the Fodre, once a symbol of liberation, became the bars. He began to rule through fear, because fear was efficient. When mortals stepped out of line, he struck them down. When gods questioned his judgment, he reminded them who held the lightning. He told himself it was necessary. That order required strength. That compassion was a luxury he could not afford. But the truth gnawed at him in the quiet moments. He had become what he overthrew. Kronos controlled through fear. Zeus controlled through fear. Kronos isolated himself. Zeus isolated himself. Kronos saw threats everywhere. Zeus saw threats everywhere. The cycle had not been broken. It had only changed hands. The other gods stopped visiting. Not because they feared him, though they did, but because there was nothing left to visit. The Zeus who had freed them from Kronos, who had fought beside them, who had laughed and schemed and dreamed that Zeus was gone. In his place sat a monument, cold, distant, perfect, and monuments do not feel. When you can control everything, you start fearing the smallest thing. A whisper becomes a conspiracy. A glance becomes treason. A moment of kindness becomes weakness. Zeus had learned to wield power, but he had never learned to wield himself. And that would be his undoing. Act 3, the temptation of rage. Then came Prometheus. Prometheus the Titan. Prometheus the wise. Prometheus the fool. He had sided with Zeus during the war against Kronos. He had helped forge the strategy that won the heavens. But Prometheus had one fatal flaw. He cared. He looked down at humanity, those fragile creatures of clay and breath, and saw potential. While the other gods saw tools, toys, or nuisances, Prometheus saw something worth protecting. So when Zeus forbade mortals from possessing fire, Prometheus defied him. He stole the flame from the hearth of Olympus and carried it down to earth. He taught humans to cook, to forge, to think. He gave them the light that separates beast from man. And Zeus felt something crack inside him. Not anger, not yet. Something worse, fear, because fire was not just warmth. Fire was independence. Fire was the beginning of the end of divine control. If humans could create light, what would stop them from creating weapons? If they could forge tools, what would stop them from building towers to heaven? If they could think, the prophecy whispered again in Zeus's mind, the one that haunted every tyrant. Your successor is already born. Zeus summoned Prometheus to Olympus. The Titan came willingly, chin high, unafraid. He stood before the throne, torch extinguished but eyes still burning. You have betrayed me, Zeus said, voice like distant thunder. I have served something greater than you. Prometheus replied. Silence. Zeus could destroy him. One word, one gesture, and the Titan would cease to exist. The Fodre hummed in his palm, eager, hungry. But something held him back. Not mercy, not yet. Curiosity. What? Zeus asked. You knew the price. You knew I would punish you. Why risk everything for them? Prometheus smiled, a sad, knowing smile. Because someone must. For a moment, Zeus saw himself in Prometheus, the rebel, the one who defied the order to create a new one, the one who believed that power should serve, not subjugate. But that was before the throne, before the weight, before the fear. Chain him, Zeus commanded. The punishment was precise, calculated to break spirit rather than body. Prometheus was chained to a mountain in the Caucasus. Every day, an eagle would descend and tear out his liver. Every night, it would regenerate. Eternal suffering for an act of compassion. Zeus told himself it was justice, that laws must have consequences, that to spare Prometheus would invite chaos. But alone in his throne room, after the sentencing, Zeus sat in the dark and felt something he hadn't felt in centuries. Shame. Every night, he could hear the screams, not with his ears, but with that divine sense that knows all suffering within its domain. And every night, he wanted to undo it. But he didn't, because to undo it would be to admit he was wrong. And a king cannot be wrong. Every time he held back the storm, he felt more human. Every time he unleashed it, he felt less. Act 4. The storm within. The storm did not come from outside. It came from within. Zeus began to lose control, not of his kingdom, but of himself. The rage he had suppressed, the grief he had denied, the fear he had buried, all of it erupted at once, without warning, without reason. He struck down a minor god for a perceived slight, then couldn't remember what the slight had been. He unleashed storms on cities that had worshipped him faithfully, then felt confused about why he'd done it. He summoned Hera, Athena, Apollo, demanding answers to questions he couldn't articulate. They approached him cautiously, as one approaches a wounded animal. "Father," Athena said gently, "what troubles you?" Zeus stared at her, and for a moment, he didn't recognize his own daughter. The Fodre crackled between his fingers, wild, untamed. Everything, he whispered, and nothing. The breaking point came on a night without moon. Zeus stood alone on the highest peak of Olympus, staring down at the world he ruled. Fires dotted the landscape, some from hearths, some from wars, some from his own lightning strikes. From this height, they looked identical. Small, insignificant, fragile. How easy it would be, he thought, to extinguish them all. One storm, one divine decree, and the world would return to silence, to simplicity, to the void before creation. No more prayers, no more betrayals, no more wait. He raised his hand. The sky responded. Clouds gathered from every horizon, swirling, darkening, converging on a single point above the earth. The Fodre in his palm grew brighter, hotter, more massive than it had ever been. This would not be a strike. This would be an ending. And in that moment, he understood. He understood what Kronos had felt when he swallowed his children. Not hatred, fear. He understood what his father had become. Not a monster, a prisoner. He understood that the storm he was about to unleash was not aimed at the world. It was aimed at himself. Because if he destroyed everything, then there would be nothing left to control. No throne to defend. No order to maintain. No prophecy to fear. Just silence. But then a voice. Small, fragile, human. The child did not pray, did not beg, simply looked up at the storm and smiled, as children do when they see something beautiful they don't understand. And Zeus stopped. The Fodre in his hand flickered. Once, twice, then dimmed. The storm began to dissolve, clouds scattering like frightened birds. The rain softened to mist, then to nothing. Zeus lowered his hand, and for the first time in millennia, he wept. You don't rule the world. You rule your fear. And if you can't rule that, you rule nothing at all. Act 5. The lesson of restraint. The transformation did not come with thunder. It came with silence. Zeus returned to the mountain where Prometheus hung in chains. The Titan had endured centuries of torture, yet his eyes still held that infuriating compassion, that impossible hope. You were right, Zeus said simply. Prometheus raised an eyebrow, as much as his broken body allowed. About what? Everything. Prometheus fell to his knees, free but weak. He looked up at Zeus, confused, suspicious. Why now? Zeus knelt beside him, eye to eye, God to Titan, equal to equal. Because I finally understood what power is. And what is it? A choice. Not to dominate, but to refrain from dominating. From that day, Zeus ruled differently. He did not stop being king. The cosmos still needed order, disputes still needed judgment. But he governed with a lighter hand, understanding that true authority comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom not to. When mortals prayed, he listened more than he commanded. When gods quarreled, he mediated rather than decreed. When storms gathered, he asked himself, is this necessary? Or is this just my fear speaking? He learned that some problems do not need solutions. Some questions do not need answers. Some chaos is not a threat, but a dance. The Fodre remained at his side, not as a scepter, but as a reminder, a symbol of the power he carried and the responsibility to wield it with care. True strength isn't domination, it's restraint, the power to destroy, and the wisdom not to. And in the quiet moments when the world slept and the stars whispered, Zeus would stand at the edge of Olympus and simply breathe. No need to control, no need to watch, no need to strike, just be. Epilogue, the silence of Olympus. They call him King of the Gods, but maybe he was just a mirror, showing us what happens when control becomes fear and power becomes burden. Zeus still rules, but he rules differently now, not with thunder, but with patience, not with fear, but with understanding. And on quiet nights, when mortals tell stories of the god who shakes the heavens, they sometimes add a detail the old tales forgot, that the greatest storm Zeus ever stopped was the one inside himself. Remember this, the gods never ruled us. They warned us of what we might become.